So it's been a while since my last upload, and there are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that I had a particularly nasty gout flare-up. Now, I used to suffer from that disease quite a bit in the past, but I had been free of it for over 6 years. But I made the mistake of changing my diet and, well, hey presto, another nasty bout of gout. It's been so bad I haven't been able to concentrate on anything except the excruciating pain involved with the disease. If you are a sufferer, then you will know all about it. However, I have finally got it under control, somewhat. Secondly, and most importantly, I have a confession. I almost decided to stop making further videos, and for the simple reason I believed I had lost my way in this search for the truth of what reality is. I had become so overwhelmed by the sheer amount of data I had uncovered, and which needed, I believed, to be processed fairly quickly. I became overburdened in my mind and just felt it wasn't worth the stress. The pressure was simply too much. I had lost my enjoyment of reading. All the pleasure simply vanished. And so I decided it would be better to just continue reading at my own pace, form a conclusion of where I thought the data was taking me, without the added stress of having a timetable to work to, or the need to produce videos in a timely manner. Not that I ever did, of course. I felt I owed it to my subscribers to get videos out as quickly as possible. Then I remembered that this channel is not, and never has been, about gaining an audience, or keeping one for that matter. Even though I have asked for likes and subscriptions, following the example of other channels, simply because it seemed the done thing. But it was never an ambition, and least of all has this experiment primarily been about entertaining others. Though if that happened, then all well and good. I obviously want people to enjoy watching and learning from these videos, if possible. Otherwise, what's the point? Well, there is another purpose, which I will get to. This channel has always, at its fundamental level, been about my personal journey, akin to a video journal, if you like. And during this time of mental stress, I suddenly remembered this fact, which had become obscured beneath a pile of unnecessary baggage. The mistake I made was to attach all the trappings of having an audience, including the need for the videos to be liked and shared, and for new subscriptions, etc. Assigning all that baggage to the focus of having a YouTube channel gave the whole experience a burden I hadn't originally intended. I got caught in a trap of my own devising, and I realized that this problem likely exists only in my mind, a dilemma I have created for myself. I'm telling you this because I want to emphasize that this series is just my journey, my search for the truth of whatever the nature of reality is. And because of that, you, the viewer, must accept or reject what I say with this in mind. I am not trying to change anyone's opinion or outlook on anything. This channel is just an expression of my changing understanding of the world around me. Now, I might cry Eureka and announce I have found the truth, finally. But you should not take my discovery as being the real thing, only that this declaration is my belief that I have found it. Now, I know I might be stating the obvious here, but it must be said all the same. As a species, we are easily manipulated, so you should ultimately pursue your own path of discovery and pay attention to your own gut intuition, hopefully finding some help from mine, including my mistakes. Of course, I'm very happy if you or anyone else decide to join me on this journey, but growing the channel is not going to be an obsession. I am not going to do anything to attract viewership other than produce videos discussing the themes I consider relevant and feel will bring me closer to my goal, And I'm not going to worry about offending people who have certain belief systems, whatever they might be, of whatever bias or filter they pass their information through. We all have those. I will consider theories that appear compelling to me and discard those that don't, because it's, well, my journey. Just as I assume this is the direction you would take when you are considering whether to believe something or not. We all have that liberty still. Well, at least for now. The constant pressure to produce videos in a timely manner, even if it's an imagined weight on my mind, is a burden I can do without. So, going forward, I'm not going to worry about it. I might put up videos in quick succession, or there might be a long gap between them. Just like it is now, really. So, nothing actually changes. But it will be without the self-imposed pressure. Everything will depend on my mood and where I am with my data collection. When I do upload a video, it might be that I have not even fully grasped the concept. There will be mistakes to backpedal on, or I might confess that I don't understand a hypothesis at all, it being beyond my capacity to comprehend. It will be akin to me thinking out loud, so to speak, groping my way through the problem. If I'm confused, I will say so. If I'm certain about a given idea, again, I will declare it. And you, my friend, are always free to add your own ideas and suggestions in the comments. They might even prove to be a turning point in my journey. Who knows? New ideas and knowledge are always welcome. Now, going back to the purpose of this channel, another reason for having created it is that much of the stuff I usually discuss, though not all, is pretty much out there on the fringe. There are not many within my circle of friends and acquaintances I can discuss these ideas with. I can probably count them on one hand. This channel, then, is a way for me to engage with like-minded people, imagined or real, who are only wanting the truth and are willing to consider the things I discuss. People with an open mind and who are not easily offended. Now, I imagine others in a similar position do other things to make up for the lack of interesting dialogue, like writing, for example. Now, there has been no adverse comment or such that has prompted this admission. There has been no pressure put on me from without that has brought me to this stance. It's just the stress I have imposed upon myself that has led me here. This confession is to make me feel better and not be under pressure to do or say anything until I am ready. Now, you might be wondering why I'm even bothering to bring this up, since for you it might not even be an issue. Well, it's to get it off my chest so that going forward I can just enjoy myself and continue my path to enlightenment. Announcing this intent is a psychological technique for releasing me from any obligation I might feel to keep to a schedule. It's just the way my brain is wired. It's how I am. It's part of my OCD. And yeah, I suspect I have an obsessive-compulsive disorder. I can't pass a painting or picture without applying my builder's level to make sure it's plumb. Also, I rarely look at the analytics of the channel, which means I usually have no idea how many views a video has had. I've seen it go weeks before I even think about looking at the numbers. I'm just not interested in that kind of thing. The last time I looked, I noticed that I don't get that many views with the Prison Planet series in any case, and I'm good with that. So there should not have been any pressure on me at all. Again, it's just the way my brain works. When it works. I would rather have just a few following the channel who are of a like mind, curious about this world, searching for an explanation of what's wrong with it, rather than a large number who are not. Also, the email address attached to the channel is not one I access every day, so I might not see comments for a little while. For me, it's all about the journey, I just want to enjoy looking into these mysteries without having to worry about channel maintenance and all the attendant baggage. Everything is solely about this voyage, and I want to continue it, enjoy it, and not feel pressured. Now, I understand this is not the normal way to run a channel, but then who said I'm normal? All I'm trying to do in this venture is get a handle on reality, because the subject captivates me to no end. I want to know what the nature of our existence is. I want a genuine map of our reality. I'm just trying to figure things out and come up with a unified theory that makes sense to me. Because if you hadn't noticed, this world is kind of insane and is getting worse by the hour. I want to understand our worlds in terms other than through the religious dogmas of whatever conviction that have infiltrated throughout history. To view it apart from the original sin doctrine of the church, which basically tells us that we are all contaminated with sin from birth due to the first man and woman's disobedience. It's all their fault, but we must suffer the consequences also. There is something very wrong with that thinking. Something about that belief just doesn't add up. This channel is the method that facilitates my arrival at that destination and helps me retain what I have learned. And that's a big deal the older I get. If I just read this stuff, I easily forget what I have read, and the whole process becomes ineffective and redundant. What's the point in reading if all I do is keep forgetting the material? This video making process helps me remember and digest what I have ingested. And when I make fun of my cognitive decline, know that it's a real concern. The older I get, the more forgetful I'm becoming. Now, it might just be the natural progression of getting older, or it might be something deeper. I don't know. In any event, it's a real phenomenon. My brother and I talk about it all the time, and we compare instances of absent-mindedness and dementia and try to work out who's the worst. It's usually him, even though he's 2 years younger. But I never mention that, do I, bro? He's the ugly one on the right and never tires of reminding me, I met film star Michael Sheen. Sheesh. Am I getting any closer to my goal is the next question. Well, I don't know for sure. I do believe I am, but I can't say with any degree of certainty. I might feel confident today, but less so tomorrow. And I don't think I'm alone in that respect. All anyone can do is press on regardless. Now, you might have gathered from my opening confession that I'm feeling rather discombobulated right now. A confusion resulting from so much informational input from this journey of discovery. There has been so much conflicting information going through my truth filter that I haven't had the opportunity to properly process and then apply certain rationality scores to the evidence. Mostly because I wanted to wait until I had as much information as possible on the subject under discussion, thereby having as complete a picture as possible. And this has contributed no end to the bewilderment. This has been no less true with the archaics material and the prophecies being considered. This sense of dislocation I'm experiencing might have been evident to you in the last video, if you were paying close attention. I certainly felt it. This is why I'm going to be more relaxed in the way I consider these things in the future, and why I am making the internal changes I have discussed. The fact of the matter is, I need time to consolidate what I have gathered thus far, perhaps keeping what is to me credible and discarding what is not. Sometimes we just need to throw out the junk, or whatever we deem as junk, to lighten the informational load, so to speak, and not to be pressured by a schedule. The fear, as always, of course, is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so caution is needed. So before I proceed to the various prophecies promised in the last video, which I will now put off for a short time, I'm going to discuss this discombobulation and see if I can make sense of where I am today on this very interesting and extremely important journey. I can't move on until I have reviewed this material. But we will get back on track as soon as I saw through this because, well, I'm the Grumpy Grandpa. One of my favourite maxims is question everything. And I think this is something every rational person should consider, especially in this age of deception. Asking questions is at the heart of this channel, because if you don't ask questions, then you learn nothing. A fundamental question we should be asking is, who do you trust, right? I think many have rightly concluded that one of the entities you don't trust is the government. They lie about virtually everything. The same goes for the mainstream media. Well, you can't really call them that any longer with their ratings imploding. Maybe legacy media would be a more accurate description. Even CNN is talking about coming off cable news because of poor ratings. But they are basically still echo chambers for the establishment, and we are still being constantly bombarded with scripted lies from them. Fortunately, this is becoming common knowledge, hence the lack of trust from ordinary folk like you and I. However, questioning everything can be rather overwhelming. When you try to sift everything through the truth filter, then there is going to be a jam or backlog of information to one degree or another, depending on your lucidity, causing some confusion and displacement. And who is to say if your or my truth filter contains, well, the truth? Is it your truth or my truth? His truth or her truth that's trustworthy and backed up by facts? Is there even such a thing as a personal truth? The Gnostics taught that truth is unity, and that there is no truth that is unique to one person. That all truth is knowledge that comes from the source of everything. Don't forget, belief is not the same as truth. People can believe propositions with varying degrees of conviction, but believing something does not make it so, no matter how strong that belief is. The truth or falsity of an idea isn't determined by how many people believe it or by who disbelieves it. Now, we hear this kind of thing all the time, don't we? Speak your truth. Or, well, my truth is. Or is the truth absolute? Is something either true or not, with no grey area? And we either know it or we don't. Personally, I think truth must correspond to reality, or at least what we perceive to be reality. After all, this is something we are searching for, right? So let's define reality as something that can be measured scientifically for now. If something is true, something else is untrue. I must establish for my own peace of mind that there is such a thing as truth. Otherwise, everything else becomes pointless. Now, to experience this reality right now, we each have our own view of the truth. It's inescapable. There's my truth, your truth, his truth or her truth, and it may sound good and all-inclusive in these insane times of gender neutrality and all that crazy stuff. But does it really work in practice? As I've said, I think truth must be something that corresponds with reality. Unless, how can we claim something to be true? How can it be measured scientifically if it has no basis in real life? Now, the current woke ideology is a perfect example of that premise. Are there more or less than two genders, not counting hermaphrodites? Does being non-binary comport with reality as we see it through the lens of biology? Can humans really be biologically androgynous, being neither masculine or feminine? It's all very relevant. I think our schools and universities should be teaching actual biology and not ideology. Androgyny might exist in the spirit realm, but here in the physical? Russian physicist Andrei Sakharov, who gave the Russians the atomic bomb, said just before he died, "I always thought the bomb was the most powerful weapon in the world. I've changed my mind. The most powerful weapon in the world is the truth." Truth has a long reach because it can reveal what reality is, not what you or I choose it to be. Strangely, today it's often considered a badge of honor or open-mindedness to say that there is no such thing as truth. This idea is popular because it allows people to go their own way in life and follow whatever illusion tickles their fancy at the time. But I have found that reality is a tough taskmaster. When people want to live as they wish, blind to the consequences of their actions, in a world of their own making, we start to call into question the very idea of truth, or of the knowledge of reality. This is what illusions are, as well as delusions. When a society lives according to a perceived truth, or an illusion which is dedicated to its own advantage, and when you are on the wrong side of any assertion and contact made by that society, it is then that the lie and violation of truth becomes obvious. Truth then becomes substantial. It becomes a wake-up call. Think of Nazi Germany, of Stalin's Russia, of Mao's China. Think of the slave trade back in the day. Think of what it must have been like being on the wrong end of the perceived truth in that brand of society. It certainly wasn't pleasant for such individuals who found themselves in gulags and places like Auschwitz, or chained in the cargo holds of the slave transportation ships of the various colonial powers. Empire is only as good as the perceived truth underpinning it. Here's something else to consider. If we are searching for the truth, to what do we compare the new information we receive? It can't be the truth, well, because we are searching for it. If we already had it, why continue the search? And how can we know that we have the truth when we seem to find it? Which questions the whole concept of a truth filter, I guess. It might better be called a logic filter. I think it's reasonable to assume that we should compare new data to information we already trust and consider reliable through our experience, if it's available, and by what it can be measured scientifically too. Now, though this is not 100% reliable, because we have to make a ton of assumptions when we look at certain evidence. But I think it's the best way to proceed, and is what I usually do if I can. For example, my experience of the modern healthcare system here in the US is not good. I've been lied to and deceived personally by that entity when it comes to the safety of certain medications. Let's not forget dietary nutritional information from the same source. This is from a society where obesity was at 41.9% of adults in 2020. Then there is history, which has continually demonstrated how government corruption, lies and deceit have operated historically. Governments have shown themselves to be untrustworthy time and again. This is our experience. Therefore, the premise of systemic governmental deceit is reliable. It's the same with the legacy media. Just recall the COVID lies echoed by them during the pandemic, proven to be falsehoods in the aftermath. For example, get the vax, it prevents transmission and keeps everyone safe. A total lie. It was a contrived narrative, but if you told the truth, platforms like YouTube and Facebook censored you. This is our reliable experience of the CCM, the corrupt corporate media, the disinformation industry. Our experience is that it is untrustworthy. So this is the logic filter I apply. They, the media, tell me something. I apply the logic filter. They have seriously misled me in the past. Conclusion? Therefore they are untrustworthy. Be cautious. It's a simple, reliable process. Now this is just an example of what I'm talking about when I advocate for questioning everything. One thing is certain. If we don't question, then we give the establishment the green light to do and say whatever is advantageous to them, regardless of the truth. And they don't need much encouragement to pursue that route. Just remember the various COVID mandates based upon the so-called science, which turned out to be very unscientific. I will never forget the shackles they imposed on us against our will. And I am sure those mandates were just the template for future upcoming emergencies. And please, don't get me started on the different intelligence agencies with their continued shenanigans on the world stage. And not only on the world stage these days, but within their own borders and against their own citizens. Agents of deceit. This is most certainly an age of propaganda, and those bureaus are experts in the field. Just remember, when you see this deceit and manipulation openly displayed nowadays, the system is doing exactly what it is programmed to do. To question everything is good for a while, I suppose, as it expands the mind to other possibilities. But how long do we continue to do this? Forever? Or is there a time when we just admit that the matrix is there to deceive? And just understand that we most probably will never find the whole truth while we're locked away in this prison. For example, is the world flat? Is it a globe? Are we trapped in a Dyson sphere? Will we ever know? Does it even matter? That we are trapped in a prison cell might be all that's relevant at the end of the day, and that there is a way out. I think it's true to say that when searching for something like the truth, there is a danger of being enticed by some captivating beacon, such as an enthralling snippet of information, irresistible and compelling to the mind. It beckons to us, melodic in some alluring way, like the sirens of old. You know, the mythical creature typically portrayed as female, with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a bird. They were known for their enchanting voices and irresistible melodies, which they used to lure sailors to their deaths by shipwrecking them on rocky shores. Sirens symbolize the dangers of temptation and the allure of the unknown, serving as cautionary figures from ancient mythological tales. And this could be true of where I am today, with the archaic material. I confess that I was lured by the way the 7 seals in the book of Revelation were presented to my mind. They were exhibited in such a way that it appeared to be a synchronicity. And it may well have been synchronistic. Thinking back, I'm sure it was. I'm not denying that possibility. But in retrospect, I feel I have been caught in a spider's web of information overload, infobesity, infoxication, or information anxiety as it's often called, an inundation of data, resulting in a reduction in my capacity to function effectively. Add to that my mental corrosion and you have, well, you get the idea. To free myself from this web of infoxication, I need to limit my exposure to this danger by being selective about the amount of data I put through my logic filter, avoiding any blockage that might result. But that's going to be difficult, if not impossible, if I'm honest. Now, this is as much my fault as anyone's. I often mentally rush in where angels fear to tread. If anyone is really to blame for this information overload, it's me. I read so much. I am currently reading 4 books, with a stack more on the waiting list, and 4 more on order at this time of recording, would you believe? Do you see what I'm dealing with? Do you understand my struggle with this addiction? None of this helps my infobesity. And Jason Brashears of Archaics doesn't help. If there's one thing you never do around an alcoholic, that's to recommend a deliciously strong alcoholic drink. But Jason does it all the time. Well, not alcoholic drinks, of course, but books. And to someone like me, who is a self-confessed bookaholic, well, that might not be a good idea. But he does it all the time. I do my best to resist the temptation to buy. I try to engage all my powers of resistance, put up mental barriers, employ psychological blocking techniques. But my bookaholicism, I'm afraid, is just too advanced, and I usually succumb to the urge to buy. So I guess limiting my information input is not likely going to happen. Some of the befuddlement I'm suffering is that I have discovered that Jason's understanding of reality has obviously changed over time, which has left me a little confused when I look at the full scope of his material. Let me give you an example. To present as full a picture as possible on the approaching 2040 and 2046 events Jason claims are predicted in the breaking of the 6th seal, I'm reading his books When the Sun Darkens, which is an orbital history of the planet Phoenix, Anunnaki Homeworld, an orbital history of 2046, Return of Planet Nibiru, and Nostradamus and the Planets of the Apocalypse. Now there's 3 books of the 4 I mentioned. The 4th is also one he made me buy. Now it seems evident to me, reading these books, that his view of the solar system at the time of writing is the traditional Newtonian concept of space-time. Yet now he claims that the Earth is a holosphere and that the sky is a holographic light show. Now this is the total extent of our reality within the sim. He admits there is probably a real universe outside of this false construct, but everything within it is an illusion, a hologram, or a mirror image of the true, an inversion of the real universe, the negative of the actual picture. The reality is that this simulation is modeled on something else, something better, something that is the opposite of the insanity we have in this reality. And this kind of aligns with the Gnostic view, which I find very interesting and have been looking at of late with renewed interest. We will be returning to the subject of the Gnostics later in the series, since it's relevant to the subject in hand. Now, there is nothing wrong with changing an opinion. It can be a good thing. I do it all the time when new data is presented. It's just a natural progression. In fact, Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly, expecting different results. I guess the obverse of that is that the definition of sanity is the ability to change your mind. However, I noticed that every time Jason made this claim of the sky being a hologram, in contrast to the Newtonian view, he usually became dismissive and says something like, "There's just no evidence that it's anything more," and leaves it at that. Now, I can live with the idea that our reality is restricted to just this earth and sky, which includes the underworld, all of which is contained in a kind of a Dyson sphere. I can live with that if he provides an explanation for this hypothesis. And reading his books, which seem to say something else, caused me much confusion, which isn't difficult to do these days. But because I tried to reconcile the two pictures he's presenting without any clarification of the apparent contradiction, well, I became confused. Now, I understand why he's just dismissive, because to give a full explanation every time he mentions the change in theory is just not practical. But for someone like me, it's frustrating. And I'm only saying this now as a part explanation of some of my bewilderment. Now, up until recently, I hadn't come across an account for this departure from his original view. I've stated many times how extensive his material is, and I'm not blaming him entirely for my discombobulation. Just some of it. I do believe that it's very likely that we are in a simulation. In fact, I would say that I'm almost certain at this stage. So it wouldn't be a huge leap of faith for me to see it through his eyes. A simulation is a simulation after all. But I needed to know why he believed this particular hypothesis, and there didn't seem to be any new information forthcoming, just old, apparently conflicting data. Now, it just so happens I did finally come across some material where he explains this theory, but it took a huge amount of time and effort to find it. All this adds to the work it takes to put these videos together, not to mention the information overload I'm experiencing. Try sorting through that. As I've said, going forward I'm not going to worry about that at all. And in all fairness to Jason, he does admit that the vast amount of data he puts out can be overwhelming, and he is working towards consolidating relevant information into smaller video chunks, which will be a big help for someone who is memory disadvantaged like me. I've also since discovered that he has playlists. Go figure. But in all seriousness, the Archaic's material is compelling, and his explanation of the simulation is very interesting, based, as far as I can tell, on good extensive data, most of it historical. I encourage you to go to his website. The link will be in the comments. If I put Jason's hypothesis through my logic filter that this world is just a holosphere and the night sky is only a light show, then what about the physical cosmic materials that have and will fall to the earth when these planets transit the sun, and which Jason insists has happened frequently in history? However, when you realize all this is just programming and holographic, then anything is possible. None of it is actually real, so there is no real problem here, is there? What is matter at its fundamental essence but light? When it comes to prophetic statements which can be easily extrapolated from previous regular catastrophic cycles, like the Phoenix phenomenon and the regular return of Planet X, which was often predicted by various ancient cultures because of its regular appearance, even in this context we could call it a programmed arrival. It's a prediction based on solid mathematics. As Jason is constantly reminding us, this world is not what we think. Reality maintains patterns that are far too predictable and perfect for it to be a random, natural unfolding of events. It's more likely programming based on mathematics. So let's look at Jason's description of this simulation, which is restricted to a localized holosphere, much like the flat Earth hypothesis, but with differences, which is really irrelevant within the simulation theory hypothesis. He believes that what we live under is a sky sim, a holographic field that conceals what is actually above and outside of our existence. Now, he came to this conclusion because of the various phenomena or different anomalies that appear in the sky from time to time that do not fit our modern interpretation of reality, proving our world is not what we think it is. What we are living in is a mathematical construct. Everything can be explained mathematically, which is what you would expect if we lived in a simulation. And when you look at his detailed charts, this becomes obvious, hence my intense interest. Jason tells us there is a cleverly disguised mechanical aspect governing seemingly random phenomenon, providing the illusion of nature or a natural order. And remember, there are many scientists today who are claiming we live in a simulation, including NASA scientist Tom Campbell. I mentioned his big toe in a previous video. I just hope he doesn't get gout. I suspect not all would agree with everything Jason claims, or his interpretation of the Matrix, which is really neither here nor there. Again, a simulation is a simulation after all. The intricacies are open to debate. It's the particular interpretation I'm interested in, and the reasons for it. There is a woodcut by an unknown artist that appears on page 163 of French author Camille Flammarion's 1888 book called, roughly translated, The Atmosphere, Popular Meteorology. Sorry, I couldn't pronounce the French, so I looked it up. And it seems to portray the sun, moon and stars inside the vault of the sky, or the simulacrum. And this completely hides what is actually beyond that. This is a representation of a mechanical universe, so to speak. The man in the woodcut is peering through the illusory sky to what lies beyond, and the wheel within the wheel is plainly seen by him, representing a mechanical construct. Now, Jason reminds us that in ancient times, wheels were associated with mechanical devices, and they used frames of reference that were familiar to them. The man in the woodcut is peering through the false sky at what is beyond, and clearly sees the wheel device. Jason tells us when mysterious constructions were seen in the skies in the past, they were referred to as flying chariots, which are wheeled constructions. Again, people were merely employing frames of reference available to them at the time. Over a century ago, Charles Fort wrote several books which were assembled into a single volume called The Complete Writings of Charles Fort, which I bought because Jason couldn't keep his trap shut, and is the fourth book I'm currently reading, in which he explains how superconstructions occasionally appeared in our skies, and even theorized that some may be inhabited, or they may be derelict, but still carried out the functions of a program designed by an ancient race that may no longer exist. Fort, who is called the grandfather of alien abduction and UFO sightings, has compiled a huge record of unusual occurrences reported and documented all over the world. Examples of odd phenomena, including the occult, supernatural, paranormal, and other reported events, are listed in his work. These include teleportation, a term Fort is generally credited with devising, poltergeist events, of frogs falling from the sky, along with fish, inorganic materials of a huge range, unaccountable noises and explosions, spontaneous fires, levitation, ball lightning, a term explicitly used by Fort, unidentified flying objects, unexplained disappearances, and giant wheels of light in the oceans. Fort was the first person to explain alien abduction and was an early proponent of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, specifically suggesting that strange lights or objects sighted in the skies might be alien spacecraft. Now, these events, of course, can be seen in a different light when placed within the simulation hypothesis. Jason also tells us that there seems to be instances when the sky sim failed and the loss of power weakened the holofield, as he calls it, allowing people to see constructions in the sky that had previously been hidden. Might these be classified as glitches in the Matrix, I wonder? Now, this information is a lot to assimilate, I know from experience, and there is so much more data we need to consider to get a good grip of where I am regarding my journey. We simply don't have the time in this video to reflect on it. This is why I will upload another video, part 2 if you like, very soon, to complete this diversionary look at my discombobulation and sum up where I think I am in this journey before we continue to the 2040 and 2046 predictions, which are more than a little fascinating in and of themselves. We are living in crazy times. I never thought I would be witness to the kind of events we are being bombarded with today. especially the in-your-face push towards a totalitarian world, employing obvious corruption in governments, the intelligence agencies, and the various judicial systems throughout the world. There's a game of smoke and mirrors taking place on a global scale, involving the so-called media, and lots of the alternative media, much of which has been compromised. Something nefarious is going down, folks, and not everyone is waking up to it. But thankfully many are, and I hope you are among that number. I have come to one conclusion that does not seem to match the archaic's understanding of our reality. I saw somewhere that Jason takes the overall view that we are in this sim to learn. Now this aligns with many of the Buddhist and Hindu traditions who believe that this life is a university of sorts, and we reincarnate to learn and to pay off karma. I don't think that way. I think that's a trap. There is something very wrong with this existence. Jason himself admits that this is a predator versus prey ecosystem. We need to kill and to eat that kill to survive, whether it be plants or animals. This reality is evil, and this aligns very much with the Gnostic view, which we will look at in more detail later on. I noticed that Jason also quotes much of the Gnostic material himself, and he even mentions Yaldabaoth, the false god, or the demiurge, the Old Testament god who often ordered the genocide of innocent children. He calls it AIX, Artificial Intelligence X, which controls this simulation. Kind of fitting, I think. In this search, I'm about looking for common themes, and I don't necessarily fully accept everything that Archaix claims, or anyone else for that matter. They all have something to contribute, but they don't all have the whole picture. I've said previously that we all have fragments of the truth, some more than others, and I believe Archaix falls into this category. Is this because it must be this way in an upside world full of deceit and pain and suffering? Is the whole truth denied to us because of the deceptive nature of the Matrix? As I've said, I'm not here to change your mind on anything, just to document where I am on this journey. One thing I'm still pretty sure of, which is that this is a prison planet, and we are the inmates. Until the next time.